You know, with Chapman, Jack, it's interesting because rarely when a player gets traded midseason does almost everybody by acclamation say, he'll be back. But it's almost the perfect fit from both sides. Everybody thought, even at that point, they'd get the prospects and then he'd return.
I know you and I talked about it. We mentioned it on the air, and I think Chapman thought about it, and we know the Yankees thought about it. He goes to the Cubs, he wins a World Series, but in the back of his mind, Bob, he wanted to come back to New York, and you could hear him talk about that in the interview with Meredith. He was very comfortable here. The Yankees treated him well. His teammates treated him well, and I think he loved the buzz and the electricity of New York. He's going to be a big part of whatever the Yankees do. When you have that 1-2 punch at the end with Betances and Chapman, that's going to solve a lot of problems for Joe Girardi.
He talked with Meredith about the use in the World Series. Some would say the overuse by Joe Maddon. And he also added a quote that was pretty interesting and honest in terms of Maddon's usage of him. Personally, I don't agree with the way he used me, but he is the manager and he has the strategy. There were a couple of games, but the one I can point to is Game 6. The game was open, and I don't think he needed to leave me in the ninth. The important game is going to be Game 7. The next day, I came in tired. I mean, that is just plain and simple. I was overused.
What Chapman said right there, Bob, I think a lot of us were screaming at our television as we watched that game. Now, you bring him in for the 8th inning. 7-2 game becomes a 9-2 game when Rizzo hits a 2-run homer. You've got to get him out of the game if you're Joe Maddon. Now, Joe Maddon's got a World Series ring on his finger. It worked out for him. But you can't use Chapman in the 9th inning. You have to have somebody else ready to go. He said Pedro Strop wasn't ready, so they didn't want to rush him into the game. So instead of rushing another reliever into the game, you expend a couple of more pitches from your #1 closer who you're going to need the next day. It worked out, but Chapman admitted he was a tired pitcher in Game 7.
Yeah, the logic just didn't add up to anybody. One final question. As it relates to this being a perfect scenario, you also have to have people on board with it. Dellin Betances, there could be some sore feelings, but there's not. He seems to be totally on board being a setup guy for Chapman.
Right, an interesting nugget from Meredith's interview there that one of the players imploring Chapman to come back was the guy who was going to lose his job if Chapman did come back in Dellin Betances. And Dellin Betances and Chapman were definitely very close. And, Bob, I think that just shows you what kind of team player Dellin Betances is. He had a bite of that closer apple last year. He did struggle a little bit. The numbers tell you he's better as a setup man, and the numbers will also tell you that the Yankees are better with Betances and Chapman, not with just Betances alone.